Ah, look who stumbled into the wrong room at the right time. Welcome back, you magnificent accident. You beautiful miscalculation in someone else's master plan. You weren't supposed to be here, were you? You weren't supposed to see what you saw, know what you know, become what you became. But here you are, standing in the center of an empire built on blood and silence. And somehow impossibly you became the one thing that can bring it all crashing down or hold it together. The Kingpin hasn't decided which terrifies him more. But before we dive deeper into this twisted reality, if you're watching this right now, if these words are hitting different, if you feel that electricity running through your veins, drop a comment below telling me you're here. Tell me you're ready to hear the truth nobody else will say. And hit that subscribe button, because these stories, these raw, unfiltered glimpses into power and transformation, they don't stay up forever. So let me tell you what really happened. Because this story, this twisted, impossible, dangerous story, it didn't start with power. It started with an accident. You walked into that room, that meeting, that moment, completely unaware that you were stepping into a world where people don't walk out the same. You weren't supposed to be there. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong face in a crowd of calculated moves and predetermined outcomes. But something happened, didn't it? Something nobody planned for, something the strategists couldn't predict, something that made a man who controls entire territories, who moves product across borders like chess pieces, who has politicians in his pocket and law enforcement on his payroll, something that made him stop and stare, and for the first time in 15 years hesitate. You know what that hesitation cost him? $3 million in a single decision. His lieutenants noticed. His enemies noticed. His allies started whispering. Because a man who controls an empire can't afford to hesitate, can't afford to have a weakness, can't afford to care about anything except the operation, the territory, the survival of the structure he built with his bare hands and other people's blood. But you became the glitch in his programming, the error in his code, the one variable he couldn't eliminate, because eliminating you would eliminate the only thing keeping his humanity from dying completely. See, they don't tell you this about men who build empires on violence. They don't tell you that beneath the calculated cruelty, beneath the stone-cold decision-making, beneath the reputation that makes grown men whisper his name like a curse, there's a part of them still searching for something real, something that isn't transactional, something that doesn't want something from them, something that sees them and doesn't flinch, doesn't calculate, doesn't perform, and you, in your complete ignorance of who he was, what he controlled, what he could do with a single phone call, you treated him like a human being. Not a king, not a monster, not a myth, just a person. And that singular moment of unintentional authenticity that cracked something in him that's been frozen for decades. Now you're standing in a position nobody survives. You're the pressure point in an armor that's supposed to be impenetrable. You're the name his enemies would kill to know. You're the leverage his rivals would pay millions to acquire. You're the weakness that every strategist in his organization prays, remains hidden, because the moment it's exposed, the entire empire becomes vulnerable. They've built contingency plans around you without you even knowing. There are men whose entire job is to make sure you stay safe, stay hidden, stay alive. Because if you fall, if you're taken, if you're used as a bargaining chip, the man who controls everything loses the one thing he can't afford to lose: his focus, his edge, his reason for building something that lasts beyond the next territory war. You became the answer to a question he stopped asking years ago. What's the point of an empire if there's nothing worth protecting? But here's where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming, including you. You didn't crumble under the weight of this knowledge. You didn't run screaming when you finally understood the kind of world you'd stumbled into. You didn't play the victim. didn't weaponize your position, didn't try to manipulate your way into more power or more safety. You did something far more dangerous, far more powerful, far more terrifying to everyone watching. You chose to stay, not because you were trapped, not because you were scared, not because you saw an opportunity. You stayed because you saw something in him that everyone else missed. You saw the exhaustion beneath the control. You saw the isolation beneath the power. You saw the human beneath the reputation. And instead of exploiting it, instead of using it, instead of treating it like leverage, you offered something nobody in his world understands. You offered presence without agenda, loyalty without transaction, strength without submission. That's when everything changed. That's when you stopped being his weakness and started becoming his strength. See, a weakness is something that can be exploited, something that makes you vulnerable, something that enemies can use to bring you down. But strength, real strength, the kind that fortifies instead of fractures, that's something entirely different. You became the reason he makes better decisions. You became the voice in his head that asks the questions his lieutenants are too afraid to ask. You became the mirror that shows him when he's crossing lines, even he didn't know he had. You became the reminder that the empire means nothing if the man building it loses himself completely in the process. And the most terrifying part, the part that makes his enemies lie awake at night trying to calculate their next move, is that he listens to you. A man who built an empire by never listening to anyone except his own instincts now pauses before making decisions. He considers consequences beyond profit and territory. He asks himself questions. He spent 15 years training himself not to ask. Now his rivals don't know how to fight him anymore. They prepared for the version of him that was pure calculation, pure strategy, pure, ruthless efficiency. They didn't prepare for the version that has something to protect beyond his own survival. They didn't prepare for a man who's building something that lasts beyond the next quarter's numbers. They didn't prepare for an empire that's no longer just about control, but about legacy. And that legacy, whether he admits it or not, has your fingerprints all over it. You're not just in his life, you're in his decisions. You're in his 5-year plans. You're in the way he restructures his operations to minimize casualties. You're in the way he's slowly, carefully, dangerously trying to legitimize pieces of his empire so there's something clean for you to inherit if everything goes wrong. Because that's what you became. You became the reason he's thinking about exit strategies. Instead of just expansion, you became the reason he's building something sustainable instead of just something profitable. Let me tell you what his second-in-command said about you in a meeting you weren't supposed to know about. He said this, and I quote, "She's either going to save him or destroy everything we've built, and I can't figure out which one terrifies me more." That's your position right now? You're standing at the intersection of salvation and destruction, and everyone in his organization is holding their breath, trying to figure out which direction you're going to pull it. His enemies are watching you, trying to find patterns, trying to understand what makes you different from every other person who's ever gotten close to him. His allies are protecting you, sometimes from threats you'll never even know existed, because they understand that losing you means losing the version of him that still believes in something beyond violence and control. You're not a pawn. You're not a trophy. You're not a weakness to be exploited. You're the foundation of something new being built on top of something old and bloodstained. But here's what nobody's telling you and what you need to understand before we go any deeper into this twisted reality you found yourself in. The blood oath he swore to you, the one he carved into his own flesh in a ceremony his lieutenants witnessed with trembling hands, that wasn't just a romantic gesture. That wasn't just a promise. That was a declaration of war against his own nature. In his world, in the empire he controls, blood oaths are sacred. They're binding. They're the only contract that matters. when money and power fail, when he cut his palm and mixed his blood with yours, when he spoke words in a language older than the cartel structure itself, when he swore on everything he's built that your safety comes before his own survival. He fundamentally altered the power structure of his entire organization. He made you untouchable. He made you sovereign. He made you the one person who can override his own orders. And his enemies, they heard about it. They always hear about it. Information is currency in his world, and that particular piece of information is worth more than entire shipments of product. Now you're walking around with invisible armor that's stronger than Kevlar, more protective than any security detail, more powerful than any weapon. You're protected by something his enemies can't fight, can't negotiate with, can't circumvent. You're protected by his word, and his word is the foundation of an empire that moves billions of dollars a year. Break his word and the entire structure collapses. His partners lose faith, his suppliers lose trust, his network disintegrates. So when he swore that oath to you, he didn't just promise to protect you, he staked his entire legacy on keeping that promise. Every decision he makes now is filtered through one question: does this keep her safe? Every alliance he forms is measured by one standard: do they pose a threat to her? Every enemy he neutralizes is evaluated by one priority: could they reach her? You became the center of gravity in a system built on controlled chaos, and everyone is adjusting their orbit accordingly. But you didn't just accept this protection passively, did you? You didn't just become the princess in the tower waiting for the Kingpin to fight your battles. No, you did something that shocked everyone, including him. You started learning the game. You started understanding the patterns. You started seeing the chessboard the way he sees it. Not because you wanted power, but because you understood something crucial. If you're going to be his strength, you need to understand his world. If you're going to be his foundation, you need to know what's being built on top of you. So you listened when he talked about territory disputes. You paid attention when he explained supply chain logistics. You asked questions about loyalty structures and enforcement mechanisms. And slowly, carefully, dangerously, you started seeing the patterns he sees. Understanding the moves before they happen, recognizing threats before they materialize. His lieutenants started noticing. They noticed that your questions weren't naive anymore. They noticed that your observations were cutting through to problems they'd been trying to articulate for months. They noticed that when you spoke, he listened with the kind of attention he usually reserves for crisis management. That's when the whispers changed. That's when you stopped being the weakness and started being called something else in their coded conversations. They started calling you the strategist. They started calling you the conscience. Some of them, the ones who understand what's really happening, they started calling you the future because they can see what you can't see yet from your position in the center of this chaos. They can see that he's grooming you not to be a partner in crime, but to be a partner in transformation. He's teaching you the game so you can help him change the rules. He's showing you the empire so you can help him build something better. He's sharing his world so you can help him find a way out of it that doesn't end in blood and betrayal. You're not learning to become like him. You're learning so he can become more like you. And that is what makes you the most dangerous person in his entire organization. Now let's talk about the part that keeps his enemies awake at night. The part that makes them miscalculate every single move they make against him. You humanized a monster. You took a man who built an empire on the principle that mercy is weakness, that emotion is liability, that attachment is suicide, and you made him care about something beyond survival and expansion. You made him vulnerable in the most terrifying way possible. You gave him something to lose, and a man with something to lose fights differently. He fights smarter, he fights harder, he fights with the kind of desperation that makes him unpredictable. His enemies prepared for the version of him that made decisions based purely on profit margins and strategic advantage. They didn't prepare for the version that's willing to burn bridges, sacrifice alliances, and take losses just to eliminate threats to you. They thought they understood his patterns. You broke all of them. They thought they could predict his moves. You made him unpredictable. They thought they knew his limits. You made him limitless. There's a story his enemies tell each other now, a cautionary tale about what happens when you threaten what he protects. There was a rival organization, a group that thought they could gain leverage by making veiled threats in your direction. They didn't touch you. They didn't even get close. They just let it be known through certain channels that they knew where you lived, where you worked, where you existed in the world. That was their mistake. Within 72 hours, that entire organization ceased to exist. Not just their leadership, not just their operations. Everything. Their supply lines cut, their safe houses burned, their bank accounts emptied. Their allies turned against them. Their protection disappeared. And when the dust settled, when the smoke cleared, when the screaming stopped, there was nothing left except a message carved into the door of what used to be their headquarters. It said in his handwriting, "Touch her shadow, and I'll erase your legacy." His enemies understood the message. You don't negotiate with something sacred. You don't threaten something protected by blood oath. You don't play games with a man who's decided that your safety is more important than his empire. But here's what makes you different from every other person who's ever had this kind of protection. Every other person who's ever been valued by someone powerful. Every other person who's ever stood in the shadow of an empire. You didn't let it change you. You didn't let the power corrupt you. You didn't start treating people differently because you knew you were untouchable. You didn't weaponize your position. You didn't become entitled. You didn't forget where you came from. You stayed exactly who you were when you accidentally walked into his world. Authentic, present, human. And that consistency, that refusal to be corrupted by proximity to power, that's what convinced him you were real. That's what made him believe you weren't playing a long game. That's what made him trust you in a way he hasn't trusted anyone since he was 15 years old, and still believed in things like friendship and loyalty. You proved that you can stand in the center of darkness without becoming dark. You proved that you can be surrounded by corruption without becoming corrupt. You proved that you can be protected by violence without becoming violent, and that proof, that living demonstration that goodness can survive in his world, that changed everything. Now his entire organization is watching you, learning from you, being influenced by you without even realizing it. The way you treat the staff with respect, the way you remember names and ask about families, the way you listen without judgment, the way you offer help without expectation of return. It's creating ripples through a structure built on fear and hierarchy. His lieutenants started treating their subordinates differently because they see how he responds to your approach. His enforcers started questioning orders that seem unnecessarily cruel because they see him questioning those same orders after conversations with you. His bookkeepers started finding ways to be less ruthless in collections because they see the organization shifting towards something that might have a future beyond violence. You're not preaching, you're not lecturing, you're not trying to change anyone. You're just existing authentically in a world that forgot authenticity was possible and that existence is revolutionary, that presence is transformative, that humanity is contagious. Let me tell you what his oldest advisor, a man who's been with him since the beginning, a man who's seen every version of him from hungry teenager to untouchable kingpin, let me tell you what he said last week. He said, in 30 years, I've never seen him smile the way he smiles when she walks into a room. Not the smile he uses in negotiations. Not the smile he uses to put people at ease before he destroys them. A real smile the kind that reaches his eyes, the kind that makes him look like the boy he was before this world got its teeth into him. That's what you did. You didn't just become his strength. You became his pathway back to his own humanity. You became the bridge between who he was forced to become and who he might have been in a different life. You became the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there's still time to build something that doesn't require him to sacrifice every decent part of himself. You became hope in a world that runs on hopelessness, and that hope, that dangerous, fragile, powerful hope, that's what makes you invaluable. That's what makes you irreplaceable. That's what makes you the most important piece on a board full of expendable pawns. But now we need to talk about the weight you carry, because nobody becomes the strength of an empire without bearing the crushing pressure of that position. You know what keeps you awake at night, don't you? It's not fear for your own safety. Not anymore. You've made peace with the fact that danger is your new normal. What keeps you awake is the responsibility. Every decision he makes now is influenced by you, which means every consequence, good or bad, has your fingerprints on it. When he chooses mercy because you asked him to consider a different path, you carry the weight of hoping that mercy doesn't come back to destroy innocent people. When he walks away from a deal because you helped him see it was built on exploitation, you carry the weight of the financial hit his organization takes. When he protects someone because you advocated for them, you carry the weight of that person's future actions. You're not making these decisions. He is. But you're in his ear, in his head, in his heart, and that proximity to power means proximity to consequence. You've started understanding why he became the way he became. You've started seeing how the choices that seem simple from outside his world become impossibly complex when you're responsible for hundreds of people's livelihoods, thousands of families, survival, an entire ecosystem built on structures that can't be dismantled without collateral damage. And that understanding, that empathy for the impossible position he's been in, that doesn't excuse what he's done, but it explains it. And explanation creates connection. And connection creates change. And change is what you're building together in the spaces between violence and control.